Hello, and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst, and we are 32 days away from our last stand, perhaps. But happy day one of the president's quarantine! What an October surprise. Just when you think nothing weirder could possibly happen, but also it's actually quite logical, the White House announced that Donald and Melania have COVID-19. We can discuss what this might mean to the election. I know some of you wonder if this is even true. I was on late night Twitter with you last night. Wild thoughts, man. A little bit too much wine for some of you. But before we dive into any of that, can I just say one very simple thing? We have to stay focused. The polls close in 32 days and 9 hours. We cannot control what Trump says about his medical condition or anything else he does for that matter. It does not appear anybody can, to be fair. Nor do we control what the corporate media says about this Shakespearean tragic comedy, or maybe it's just a comic tragedy, or just plain poetic justice, or cause and effect, logic. We can control the work we and our allies do. You can join me if you like in saying, great job, Joe Biden, for the Biden campaign's decision to start knocking on doors to make sure everybody votes. Welcome to the campaign, Joe Biden. But let's not let this passing circus distract us from the job at hand, which doesn't mean we can't enjoy the elephant show, of course. Someone has to sweep up after this parade. It might as well be us. It should be us. If Biden breezes into the White House, and he thinks he will, with an AstroTurf primary and a general, well, look at us. We've been organizing, and the movements are only growing. What better way to get moving on day one? So let's start with the various conspiracy theories. Honestly, I am not sold on the idea that there is a plot here. Some of you probably know about Occam's razor, the idea that the simple explanation is most likely to be the correct one. Well, the simple explanation is that Donald Trump is a narcissist. He denied the worst pandemic in 100 years, paraded recklessly before large crowds, spurned basic safety rules, including masks and distancing, mocked those who abided by these rules, and knowingly lied about the dangers. His allies overseas caught COVID early. His friends here also caught it. Herman Cain died. Then, naturally, he caught the virus, along with his wife and senior staff member Hope Hicks. That is the simple explanation. If given all that you are, still a conspiracy theorist, consider these arguments in favor of my simple view. Number one, Trump does not want to look weak. Getting sick is weak, at least in Trump world. He said it himself. Number two, he does not want to acknowledge his failure in handling COVID. He says it's because he doesn't want to create panic. But we know it's about keeping his base believing his alternative reality, his alternative facts. Hard to imagine a bigger symbol of failure than infecting the White House. Number three, he needs to be on the campaign trail and on camera. Maybe he'll Zoom from his sickbed, who knows, but it really suits him to be out there talking to folks, putting on a parade, and of course the circus following him around. He needs that base excited. That is number four. He needs to be exciting his base. Trump and his team see their strength in speaking to the base at these rallies indoors, these rallies without any masks to be seen, these rallies in swing states like Wisconsin and Florida, where he was supposed to have rallies this week. They're also peaking when it comes to COVID. Number five, a rebound from COVID would take weeks, but people are voting now. If he sticks to a 14-day quarantine, he won't emerge until October 16th. A record number of ballots, beyond anything history could predict, are being cast now, already in. There are fewer undecideds now, but of course it doesn't matter if that might not matter at all, especially in swing states. But this is a critical time to swing those voters and create more momentum, which seems to be moving in Biden's favor. As Biden grows his momentum, and it will only grow because Trump is not on the trail, Trump's momentum will logically diminish because he is the biggest campaigner for his own campaign. And if he's locked up, he can't campaign. I don't understand why he would want to do that. Inshallah, as Joe Biden said at the debate, to the considerable joy of many voters of Arab descent who form a considerable group in the swing state of Michigan. We love them. One other factor to consider in this mix: it is true the first debate did not go well for Trump. It is still a leap to think canceling the 2 remaining debates would be good for him. Biden got through that first debate in one piece by the skin of his teeth. Trump tried to knock him out in debate 1 and failed. Putting in the martial arts imagery Trump thinks in, he still failed. So odds are he wants another shot. All of which is to say, it's a huge leap to venture down that conspiracy route. But have at it, if you like. Get it out of your system. You know, I know what's happening on Twitter. But bottom line, I don't think that this is something that Trump wanted, the Trump campaign wanted. Their whole goal in the last few weeks is to be excite the base and move whatever swing voters and, of course, depress likely voters for Joe Biden. Good luck at that. Meanwhile, we have a wonderful show for you today. We have Vicky Osterweil. She is the author of In Defense of Looting, A History of Uncivil Action. Needless to say, this is a controversial stance across the board. She's been getting attacks from the right, Bret Stephens, the centrists, and a few people even on the left. We will go deep in with her to understand her view that sanctifying property over people is another artifact of racial oppression. And later, for our panel, we have Jovanka Beckles and Jamie Peck. But first, let's look at the stories at the top of my newsfeed. COVID, clearly the top story. President Trump confirmed late Thursday night, very late Thursday night, that he and the First Lady have tested positive for coronavirus. Meanwhile, Vice President Biden and Jill Biden, who wore masks the other day, most of the time except on stage, have tested negative. Trump's campaign will be postponed while the president quarantines and recovers. Maybe. There is more COVID news. Amazon reported that 19,816 of its workers at Amazon and Whole Foods divisions have been infected in the pandemic. The company has boomed through online shopping, as we know, while others have suffered. Warehouse and delivery staff became frontline workers. Chris Smalls, of course, has highlighted this work, and it is turned into a movement. But Amazon argues that the infection rate for its 1.3 million workers was actually low compared to the country overall. But the company has rejected requests for more detailed data by individual warehouses or even by community or state. Amazon workers have walked out in a number of locations to protest conditions, and at least 10 employees have died of COVID-19. Oh, and remember, the wealth of owner Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest man in the world, has increased by billions of dollars this year, while everybody else has suffered. There's more voter suppression by the GOP. The Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, declared that no more than one absentee ballot drop-off location would be allowed per county. Texas's Harris County had already begun to use a dozen ballot collection sites to serve its 4 million people. So just stop here for a moment and think about this. Harris County is the 3rd largest county in America. It is bigger than half of the states. It includes Houston. There's only one possible motivation for saying that a jurisdiction that large should have just one location to drop off your ballot. That explanation, of course, is voter suppression. This is how the Republicans operate. It may seem like a small administrative action that doesn't get picked up in the media, but its goal is clear. Hillary Clinton won Harris County by 12 points in 2016. What if Biden could do even better? Right now, the numbers are showing record drop-off ballots across the country, record mail-in ballots, record early voting. So my guess is he probably would do better. The Democratic dream of flipping Texas blue might actually be within reach this year. And Governor Abbott knows this, and he will do anything he can to heed that off. Okay, on with our show. I said yesterday we would encourage a diversity of ideas. In Defense of Looting is surely one of those, and I'll bet it'll break your mind. And I'm going to actually ask questions like Joe Rogan. I'm sensitive to it. I'm open to it, probably more than most. But I also want to ask tough questions so that we are armed to discuss these things with the Joe Biden supporters out there the loyalists, I should say, who are still calling out protesters. The more you know, eh? And then later we will be back. We will be on with Jovanka Beckles and Jamie Peck to discuss coalition building on the feminist left. Be back right after this. Okay, here we go. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm really excited about this conversation because I love when folks not really introduce ideas, but reintroduce ideas to the mainstream and blow every faction's brains. Like they can't process the idea of their reality and their narratives being broken. Vicky Osterweil is the author of In Defense of Looting, a riotous history of uncivil action. In Defense of Looting is a history of violent protests sparking social change, a compelling reframing of revolutionary activism, and a practical vision for a dramatically restructured society. Vicky, thank you for joining us. Oh, you're on mute. Darn Zooms.
Of course, it's classic. Thank you so much for having me. We're 6 months into the quarantine. I still can't press the button. Hi.
Listen, I do it every day, so so I should know better. Okay, so I think having this conversation now, I mean, especially as voting is underway with a president now supposedly in quarantine, with the debates, the first debate having been done, Biden astroturfing his way to hopefully a victory, I guess. You had mentioned that you don't believe justice will be found on in the ballot box. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, on the one hand, we are obviously facing a crisis for the constitutional system as it has been, as it has existed since the Civil War. That is sort of threatened by Trump. But yeah, I don't think that any reforms can actually transform that come through voting can actually transform the fundamental anti-blackness and white supremacy of the system.
So the system is, built literally on what you just said. It's built on white supremacy. Our police forces are, even in the government, I've said this over and over on the show, the FBI is investigating police departments across the country for white supremacy, organizing cells within the police department. Of course, the police was set up to basically control slaves. So just what you're saying here, that element has been left out of the narrative. But then the other aspect you bring up is that looting is a form of social justice. Can you explain?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think, one of the things that's been interesting about, as you said, breaking everyone's brain with this take is that we just lived through one of the largest uprisings in American history, which saw looting occurring in every major city and many, many minor cities in the country. So I think what upset people was that anyone would defend it and make an argument for it, because clearly a lot of people are doing it. It's a tactic that immediately appeals to people as a way for striking back against the police, and in the face of their terrorism and their murder. And the reason I argue that it does that is because it gets to the history of the intersection of whiteness, property, and the police, which are all reinforcing ideas, reinforcing combined forces in the United States, both historically and in the present. So when folks rising up against the police and against white supremacy loot, they are directly and immediately attacking that link, and that freaks people out.
So when this is all happening, and we're looking at businesses across the country, small businesses start putting signs in their windows saying, we support BLM, we're a small business, we're black owned, we're female owned, whatever it is. I mean, there was like a long list. They were making the case to looters, like, skip us, go to Walmart, or right. Skip us, go to like the big box stores. Is there really a strategy like that, or is that something that just sort of played out naturally?
No, that happened in the 60s as well, during the urban unrest. And often what happens is, because people who are rioting and looting, like, they live in those communities where it's happening, and they know the businesses where, it's actually a local person who like runs it. They tend to know, where people are exploited, where people are getting minimum wage work or getting followed by security. They live in these communities. They tend to know which businesses are actually malicious and which aren't. And so, like, maybe some of them are minority owned, but that person like lives way outside the community. And like, there's a lot of different tactics that go into it. And a lot of the opposition that I think liberals in particular, but also on the left, like to provide is like, what about small businesses? But that's a dodge, because the question is, what is happening in this country that the police can murder Black people with impunity on camera and get away? And the people who say, what about small businesses? They don't suddenly cheer on looters in Chicago, for example, when they went down to the Magnificent Mile and attacked the Gucci and the Tesla. They weren't suddenly like, yes, this is the action I want. They're opposed to looting in general. Small businesses is a moral argument that they can make to defend themselves from it. So yes, I think that the looters and rioters, they're a part of the community. They know which businesses act more or less, oppressively in their communities, and they react accordingly.
So what is it about looting that is an actual tactic against police?
Yeah, so basically the police exist, as you mentioned. They sort of first form around the plantation and in colonial places to basically protect white property from the threat of, in the U.S. and in the South in particular, Black people escaping the plantation, and therefore destroying white property. So the police have always existed to protect white property. In the North, they were often mostly enforcing fugitive slave laws. They also would crack down on unions. So in the present, what the police do is they protect property. They protect private property. It's what they do. They don't protect people, which I think is very, very clear to anyone who's been paying attention for the last 10 years. And so when you attack, when you create a space without police, then suddenly you can have things for free, right? That's what looting demonstrates, is that in a riot zone where the police control is no longer present, you can share all of the commodities that are available in the city, all the food, all the nice things that you otherwise have no access to become available, because once the police have been pushed out, then the myth that is property and private property, as it is owned and constructed now, is revealed for what it is, which is just that, a myth.
You go back to the LA riots, right? And there were these images of communities being pitted against each other. The Korean community in the I forgot what the name of the street is in LA. I can't remember, but Central LA. Someone's gonna yell at me now. They were out there protecting their small businesses, and it created it really pitted people against each other. Was that a media narrative, or is that? You saw the imagery, but.
Absolutely. So one of the causing factors of the LA riots was the murder of Latasha Harlan, who was a 15-year-old Black girl who went into a small immigrant-owned business run by a Korean woman, and she murdered her for stealing an orange juice, and the money for the orange juice was in Latasha Harlan's hand. And then she was let off with community service for cold-blooded murder in her business. So that was one of the causes of the LA riots. As a result, a lot of the conflict in LA was with Korean businesses, which tended to be a small Korean business owners were very, very concentrated in South LA. But I think one of the things that's really important about the book and the argument I make is to look at the tactics that people use, right? So when we talk about things like communal violence, right? So rioting, anti-Muslim rioting in India, for example, what rioters focus on is murdering people, hurting people, burning down private homes. In LA, there was this one, there were a few famous gun battles between Korean store owners and rioters, but Black rioters didn't kill Korean people. That wasn't the goal of the riot. They weren't attacking maybe their businesses, but they weren't committing violence against people for the most part, and a lot of those fights that they captured were instigated, and then it became an instance of and in any case that occasionally fights broke out, but for the most part, I think you can really just watch the tactics that the majority of people are doing to see the goals of the movement that's present. And I think what we saw in LA, even though many Korean businesses were attacked, people were largely not being attacked. And so the media hopped on the three big instances of people being attacked that they caught on video, the beating of Reginald Denny, very famously at an intersection, and that gunfight between the Korean shop owners. It was really them shooting. There wasn't anyone shooting back in that video, I think, if you look. But I don't remember. In any case, so the media will zoom in on any interpersonal violence it can to try and paint the whole movement that way.
So how does this move the needle? I mean, if we're in an election where a good chunk of the population, even if is not swayed by these arguments, even on the Democratic side, and God forbid, somebody is swung by this argument in the wrong direction in a key swing state, as we saw in the last election, a few thousand people determine the election, not to mention a lot of people staying home. But Donald Trump, this seems like an argument, this is Bret Stephens' point, which I never agree with, but I'll reference it. Bret Stephens' point was essentially that this is arming Donald Trump with another argument against the left. And of course, Joe Biden basically echoed that.
Yeah, absolutely. Liberals are not very happy about this argument being made in public. But I think, for one thing, I'm not focused on electoral politics, since I don't think justice can come that way. I also don't think that we can focus our arguments on how it might affect a news cycle. But also, I think one of the facts of this summer was that the uprising was a huge and maybe permanent blow to Trump's popularity. And the uprising was incredibly popular. It was more popular than Trump. It was more popular than Biden. And so the idea that then arguing that the uprising was good, which is, my book's really a history book. It's not really, but I'm just trying to think through the uprisings that we were actually living through. And by arguing on behalf of them, these uprisings that are popular, the idea that is giving Trump ammunition rather than 4 centuries of settler colonialism, the history of slavery, an election system that's rigged, that he loses an election by 3 million people and comes to power, just like George W. Bush before. And now even that's not enough. He's going to lose this one anyway. So he's already planning to do basically a de facto coup. The idea that making radical arguments is ammunition for the right is I think obscene, frankly.
I couldn't agree more. And the fact that liberals respond to it, and I mean, immediately watching this stage of the debate, the things that Biden was able to get out of his mouth were defenses to the terms that Trump was setting. So it's infuriating. But how does it move the needle?
Well, so far I've made most of the people I don't like in this country angry, which is a very happy. I did not anticipate having all that power, so that was really
Who's
nice.
Your favorite one?
Oh God, Newt Gingrich probably. Newt Gingrich getting in his feelings was pretty good. Bill Maher was also very satisfying.
Oh, did he profile this?
Oh yeah.
I stopped watching him.
I haven't. I couldn't keep track. People keep telling me people I didn't know about, but I think Newt Gingrich was. I was hoping it would give Henry Kissinger a stroke and he would die, and I would have. Anyway, but I think now I've forgotten the question because I was doing a joke.
Sorry, how is it moving the nudie needle?
Oh yeah. Well, I think I think what I was hoping to talk to were people in the movement who genuinely support the goals of, police reform or abolition, who genuinely support the transformation away from this settler colonial and white supremacist society, but who look at looting and rioting and think that's too far, or I don't know, or I feel uncomfortable, or I don't understand why this happens. So the book isn't really pointed towards the people in the media who are going to hate it anyway, because they want to defend property. It's for people in the movement and people who are curious about the movement to think about the ways this tactic emerges and to push back against this knee-jerk and, in my opinion, anti-Black response to looting, since looting has really, and I've traced this as a whole chapter, the final chapter in my book, looting has become a very effective dog whistle since the 60s. And so I think that trying to push back on that was really important to me.
On that note, it was weird to see that there was this moment where liberals, I think they were trying to balance, and even CNN to an extent, every day was like their message changed because it's like, well, we have to be pro-BLM. We know that now.
Right.
But this is really crazy. We don't know who's behind this. And then came in like, well, we think that there might be some like foreign instigators in the country looting. Is there any evidence of that? I mean, do you have any?
No, I mean, there's no evidence. And the outside agitator thing didn't even work that well because it was everywhere. Outside agitators is a pretty effective lie that goes all the way back to slavery. I trace this in my book. On the plantation, slave owners would say, "Oh, the enslaved would be happy if only these terrible people from the North didn't come and convince them they were real human beings." So the outside agitator myth has always been deeply, deeply racist and anti-Black from its very beginnings. I think it goes back further. Actually, I think it even goes to colonial struggles. But anyway, so this time the outside agitator trope didn't work because the uprising was everywhere. So it was really hard. Like, where is there like a incredible Antifa farm in Nebraska where they're like sending out like planes full of soup or whatever it is, it's just not like, it doesn't make any sense. So the outside agitator thing, like they tried that for a while. It didn't really stick. So then they turned to the white anarchist line. Right. And the white anarchist line is a more complicated version of the outside agitator trope because it erases Black anarchists, it erases Black radicals. It implies that only white people are political actors while simultaneously imagining that only a certain kind of troublemaker, oh my God, my cat is the worst. She literally broke into the room. Okay. Only a certain kind of troublemaker could possibly like want to be doing this in the first place. So like the white agitator line really, the white anarchist line became sort of the outside agitator boogeyman. And we're seeing the New York Times reproduce that again. They just had another hit piece in their op-ed a few days ago. So it goes on. Yeah.
I mean, with that being said, like there were definitely activists and leaders, community leaders, Black women in particular, like they were taking a stand. I saw several videos where they were calling out others for agitating and for looting, and like there was a strategy and they were like going away from the strategy, and it was changing the conversation away from their agenda. I mean, this is natural, obviously, in movements. There's a lot of different organizations and folks out there. I mean, do you buy into that like they have one strategy that they think is going to be very effective and the looters are canceling that strategy out or hurting it?
I'm not sure. I believe them. I believe when they say that's how they're experiencing it. I don't think a strategy that looters could cancel out would be very effective, personally, especially considering this uprising started with 3 days of rioting and looting in Minneapolis that led to the burning down of a police precinct. And that direct action caused it to spread to the entire country. So I'm not very sympathetic to the idea that looting and rioting hurts the movement. But I also want to speak. Those are people I want to talk to and have a conversation with. Those are the people this book is for. It's like I understand it. You're concerned about the movement. You want it to work. You want to win. And you think looting and rioting doesn't work. And so my argument is, look, historically, there has never been a liberation movement that hasn't involved more direct attacks on property, on whiteness, than just nonviolent protest. And we can't control a movement in such a way where none of that can happen. It won't work and we won't win. That's the argument that I'm making. But it is to those people because I'm sympathetic and I understand that there are people who genuinely want to win who get frustrated in the street when they see this happening. So it's in solidarity with them that I offer the critique.
I wasn't in New York when the majority of the looting was happening during the George Floyd protests, and I was expecting to go back to the city in Manhattan and see, Fifth Avenue stores like boarded up and spray paint, but basically just looked like Fifth Avenue because these are very large companies that, like, 3 days later, when cleaned up, put in new windows, could afford it. The arguments that I was hearing in certain circles and in the New York Times, in the Nation of all places, was this is really going to damage the economy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the goal.
It's okay.
Hi,
We're a pet friendly show.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's quarantine. There's no controlling it.
You can't. My dog barked the other day.
She's gonna knock it over or something. She's gonna take it. Sorry, baby. So yeah, I think the idea that it would damage the economy, that a little bit of rioting, I think is erroneous. Obviously, I mean, I think we saw that it didn't. But I think what they are scared about ultimately is that people would be able to reproduce their lives without having to go to work and without having to pay rent. That's the ultimate thing. That's the horizon that looting points towards, and rioting, which is an idea that we would actually live outside of a capitalist economy, which our planet needs desperately. Not only do we need as individuals, not only do Black people need for liberation, not only do Indigenous folks need for justice and for land back, but we need it because the planet is going to die. Like it couldn't be more urgent that we live outside that economy. So when they talk about, oh, looting hurts the economy, it's not true in the immediate, although they may be thinking about in 77, the blackout looting in New York was used as an excuse by many business owners to not return, to escape the city. That happened in Detroit in the 68 as well. A lot of people still blame the riots for destroying Detroit when the rest of the Rust Belt also went down in the same period. So it's a common trope. It's not really true that a riot that we have, of the scope that we have seen, can actually destroy the economy. But I think they are right to be frightened that the horizon it points to is a city without an economy in which we live together in solidarity and flourishing.
It's interesting I've never thought about it from that perspective. New York is obviously facing a down economy. Its unemployment's at 16% right now in the city. And looking back, I'm curious to see if we make it through climate change. If 20 years from now, folks are going to blame it on the uprisings and the looting rather than the fact that people are moving out because COVID it's too hard to manage in so many different ways. Yeah. Vicky, fascinating arguments. I think people are empowered. There's a lot of ammunition here to fight back. You've definitely broken my brain a little bit, and hopefully we can have you on again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. I live for breaking brains, so I'm so glad. I live to serve. Yeah.
Vicky Osterweil, in defense of looting. There's a really great, by the way, I just want to promote this. There's a really great interview with you in The New Yorker from September 3rd, just a few weeks ago. Actually, it was a month ago now. I definitely urge people to check it out. We can put that link in the information section, because I thought you were able to answer his questions very well. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise gotcha, but it went out okay. It went okay in the end.
You handled yourself well.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have our Friday Feminist panel with Jamie Peck and the one and only Jamie Peck, who's like finishing up at Majority Report and coming on over here. And of course, Jovanka Beckles, who is a former council member in Northern California. We're going to have a hearty conversation about building coalitions on the left. That's up next. Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers. All right. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. This is my favorite panel of the week. Not that I don't love everybody else, but it's very close to my heart. We're talking about Femme Fridays. We have Jamie Peck, who is a producer and contributor to The Majority Report, and she's the co-host of The Antifada on patreon.com/The Antifada. Is that correct?
That's right.
I got it. I've heard it enough. I should know. And Jovanka Beckles, a former council member in Richmond City. She is a movement organizer, and now she is a candidate for the AC Transit workers, and a union leader, too, I should add.
Nice.
Thanks for coming back on, too. So I want to talk about coalitions, but there are, listen, the COVID news is like too big. It's like too much. And somewhere buried in all these stories about Trump and Melania having COVID is the recordings that were leaked of Melania. And I would love to hear your guys' reaction to this, because I feel like they've saved this for their October surprise, not knowing that the real October surprise is that they get COVID. Surprise! Dorsey, can we show that clip of the recording, or part of the recording at least?
I'm the same like him. I support him. I don't say enough. I don't do enough.
No,
where I am, I'm working like my ass off.
I know.
That Christmas stuff that, who gives a about Christmas stuff and decoration, but I need to do it, right?
Yeah, but imagine 100%. You have no choice.
And then I do it, and I say that I'm working on Christmas, planning for the Christmas, and they said, oh, what about the children, that they were separated? Give me a break. Where they were saying anything when Obama did that?
I know.
I cannot go. I was trying to get the kid reunited with the mom. I didn't have a chance. Needs to go through the process and through the law.
But here's my thing. Hear what you just said. But instead of that, if your messaging, you were so loved.
They would not do the story. We put it out. They would not do the story.
I'm telling you.
You would not believe it. They would not do the story because they would not do the story because they are against us, because they're liberal media. Yeah, if I go to Fox, they will do the story. I don't want to go to Fox.
It's so interesting.
Okay. There's so much to unpack here. On one hand, I'm like kind of sympathetic to her, because I'm just like this poor oppressed woman who like doesn't want to do Christmas, right? No, I'm saying there's a couple things here. Come on. Patriarchy is like a real complicated thing, right? There's a woman who is like being held hostage and forced to do the Christmas stuff. I feel like you're like, don't do that. And then she's brainwashed, but then she also knows Fox is like bullshit. So, all right, Jovanka, I can feel it. I can feel it in your veins. Coming out of your pores.
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't know if you saw my jaw dropped. I don't know why I'm still surprised by any of the comments that comes out of the White House by the sitting president and his wife. But I'm still, my jaw is dropped. The amount of privilege and that she's experiencing, and it just oozes out of her spirit, is so disgusting. I can't even, I'm just like, I can't. That people, she's so oppressed that she has to do this Christmas celebration, and oh my gosh, and just talk about the oppression of her rather than these children that are caged, that she would so minimize these types of travesty that's happening around her. Is just, yeah, it blows my mind. I just can't even.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Jamie, you're like immediately like, no, don't feel. Come on. If you were First Lady, I mean, it packaged together in a really weird way, but You wouldn't want to do Christmas decorations either, even if it is a privilege. You don't want to do that.
I mean, honestly, if I'm being real, I kind of like Christmas decorations. This is one of my more controversial
Killing me.
opinions that I've
Keep
had.
it real, Jamie. Keep it real.
You're so basic, Jamie.
I'm sorry. I am Jewish. It's a whole thing. I enjoy Christmas, but if I'm being serious in a different way, I think that this shows really what the limits are of coalition building, because we here on the left, we all are fighting the war on Christmas, right? You'd think that we would want any takers that we could possibly have in this fight. But I think what this tape from Melania shows is, even in something as important as the war on Christmas, the enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend.
Boom. Okay, panel over.
Mic drop.
So Jovanka, you've actually you've been in office, and to go into coalition building, how do you on the left, just tactically? I mean, I don't know how many progressives were in the council with you, like actual progressives, percentage-wise. I'm guessing it's really small. How do you tactically push people into signing bills and getting the votes needed when it's hard enough to get elected? What's your number one tactic?
Well, first of all, on the Richmond City Council at the time that I was had the honor of serving. We had a majority of progressives, and it was because of that coalition building and knocking on doors that we were able to elect true progressive, true revolutionaries, as I like to say. And it was because of that coalition building that we had a majority on the Richmond City Council. And because of that, we passed we were the first in the state to pass a $15 minimum wage. It was because of that coalition building and having a majority on the Richmond City Council that we were able to pass rent control, the first rent control policy in 30 years. It's because of that coalition building and electing progressives and revolutionaries that we were able to pass a policy that creates an automatic investigation when there is a incident of police shooting or abuse. So if a police roughs up someone, they ended up in a hospital, because that was the case in Richmond with a mentally ill person, it's an automatic investigation. Before that, the families would have to, basically halt their grief and focus to get to have a written appeal and complaint within, I think it was something like 30 days, something ridiculous. And who has time when you're grieving? Who has time when you're trying to take care of family members? So this policy that I'm really proud to have authored is an automatic investigation. Families don't have to worry about that. So, when we have these kinds of policy builders and movement builders, we can really have policies. We can have laws that actually support the community and benefits the communities to improve the quality of life for them. It was because of progressives, revolutionaries on the Richmond City Council that we created the first ban the box in the state of California. And I don't know, Nomiki, if you are aware of what the ban the box policy is, but for those the listeners who may not know, it's really, we called it the fairness in hiring. And what it does is it takes away the question that actually keeps people oppressed who are re-entering our society from incarceration. And the majority of those people tend to be Black and brown folk. And so by eliminating that question, people now have a fair chance of employment. And Richmond was the first one to do this. So I am I'm a living example of what we as a coalition can do when we join forces, when we have a movement of multiracial working class movement. There's so much that we can do.
So Jamie, that's coalition on the left, and one thing I think that we've seen in the last couple of years in particular, but not always, there's some surprises, but I think, what's happening is the establishment is seeing the left coming now. Yes. And when AOC got elected, they didn't pay attention to her, even her opponent didn't pay attention to her. And of course she won, even though the vote count wasn't even that high. It was a very low turnout election. But moving forward, the Jamal Bowmans of the world, there are these left side coalitions. I'm not even going to say full left because, they might be endorsed by DSA, but there are also some institutional organizations that lean progressive, but like take corporate money, for instance, that are backing them. And that seems to be like what's getting folks elected. But like, at what point is it too much to compromise?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't pretend to have all of the answers to that. I could see why people like DSA would want to build coalitions with groups that maybe have more money than them and can fund their campaigns. At the same time, you know, there is a reason why corporations give money to groups in the first place. They want to have control over what kind of legislation gets introduced, what kind of legislation gets passed. So I think we need to be strategic, but also we need to be careful. And we need to be looking to, because, right, the motto is, you know, they've got money, we've got people, right? We need to be looking away from the money and towards the people to provide that kind of support that, you know, money can't buy, that kind of grassroots support. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like, I would really like to see DSA and their candidates looking more towards grassroots groups and radical groups, abolitionist groups like No New Jails, and other groups that exist in the left grassroots ecosystem rather than the NGO industrial complex.
Well said, NGO. And, you know, listen, in New York, like, if there's a place, and California's the same way, if there are places, there are a lot of people in New York, there's a lot of diversity of opinions in New York on the left, and a lot of money in New York. And so there are remnants of the machine left. And, you know, Tammany Hall was leftist. It's hard for a lot of folks to believe that. It got jobs for immigrants. It fought back against like the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. I mean, that was their whole goal, was to get more immigrants in office. And with that also came machine politics, right? But we're seeing some of that kind of on the left now in New York in particular, where DSA, I think what's happening is people are like, oh, okay, this is how we're winning. We're all going to join this party now, or we're going to do this, you know, join this organization. And people aren't pausing and saying, wait, why do, and they're using, the organizations are using DSA's manpower to take credit for these wins. So I guess, like, I mean, these are really critical and tough questions to ask, because if you're a candidate running right now, I mean, and you want to push forward your ideas, control your campaign, bring in movement people, why would you say no to some of these institutional organizations? Jovanka, let's go with you, because you've done this personally.
Oh, yeah. No, I love my DSA comrades. I love those revolutionaries. And I know personally, just in the Bay Area, DSA East Bay has been, you know, really taking a fundamental part in this campaign for AC Transit. And I know that coalition building with groups like the Richmond Progressive Alliance and other revolutionary organizations have really played a big part in electing true progressives and true revolutionaries in the East Bay. And part of that, the campaign, part of what really sets DSA East Bay and the Richmond Progressive Alliance and the Berkeley Progressive Alliance and organizations like that, you know, is the commitment to a corporate free pledge. And, you know, and so every campaign that I've been a part of has been corporate free. And that's the pledge that I will continue to live by. And I really appreciate DSA also taking on that pledge. And so, you know, I can't speak to what's happening in New York, but I can speak to what's happening in the East Bay. And I do see that that's been one of the primary goals, is to have candidates that are not taking any corporate money.
It's hard. Like, it's. I think a lot of folks aren't really actually looking. It's not easy to go through filings, especially if it's not national. So folks may not even know.
But it's possible, and it's possible, and I think that we are an example of that possibility of not taking corporate money and not dealing with organizations that are taking corporate money. We've done it in Richmond. We're doing it here again in the East Bay, and it's possible because now, although with COVID, it's, you know, things are different. We're not able to go out and knock on doors and have that, you know, those boots on the ground type of campaign strategies, but holding on to the integrity of the no corporate money, I think, is incredibly significant and something that I'm proud of, and I'm proud of the organizations that I belong to, including East Bay DSA, that have really committed to that that pledge.
That's awesome. Jamie, I mean, what do you think? Is it, going back to that question about you're running for office, you've got all these coalition groups, activist groups on the ground, and then non-corporate funded activist groups, and then a bigger organization comes in and says, we want to support you too. But they may not, they may appear left, but may not be taking some corporate money. What would you do?
I mean, I don't think that electoral politics are really worth engaging in if we can't do it in a way that holds on to our principles. And one of the things that will help us to do that is building independent, working class institutional power outside of the Democratic Party, outside of organized labor. Like, I'm a very pro-organization person. I've definitely moved. I've gotten a little less anarchist in my old age. I'm still like somewhat anarchist adjacent. Don't worry, guys. But like my caucus Emerge just released an article about what the party is and what the party is supposed to do, because I feel like a lot of the time people get caught up on the party as a ballot line or the party as something that only runs candidates, when the more leftist definition of a party, I mean, people have different definitions, but it's basically an explicitly political organization that serves to stitch together all of these different struggles and cohere a vision with and as a working class organizer or folks with socialist or even communist politics. I mean, the Black Panther Party is actually a really good example of a party that did a lot of the things a party is supposed to do, right? They provided for people's material needs with things like lunch programs. They provided for people's intellectual needs with things like political education. And the leaders of the party were always available. They were always available to whoever wanted to talk to them about stuff. And that is so, so important. So, obviously there are going to be differences between various party formations that we've seen in the past and what might be appropriate for this historical juncture. It might not be a single party. It might be a federation of parties, because this country is so vast and so diverse, and there are going to be different groups springing up that are led by different sorts of folks, but who have interests in common. But getting back to electoral politics, it is really hard to map something like a socialist project onto the system that we currently have. And I think that's part of why we have such a big succession problem on the left right now, because it is so rare that you're going to find someone who is a socialist and who believes in socialist ideas, even wants to overthrow the capitalist system on the one hand, but also is willing to jump through all the hoops and has all the qualities that would make you a good candidate within the very dumb system that we have right now. So, TLDR, it's complicated, but best case scenario, I think we can run candidates when it makes sense to do so. And hopefully they help to spread class consciousness to everybody in the country. And maybe they'll be able to get some wins that make the working class fight from a stronger position.
So once folks do get elected, I mean, in New York and in the Bay Area, thank God, you guys have been able to have big wins. We're nowhere near that in New York, even though we're supposed to be super majority state. We're not at all. But there are a couple of socialists that are going into the assembly, that are in the Senate, a couple in the council, New York City Council, but they got to build coalitions internally. Like, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, you may not be able to rise up into leadership. You may not be on a good committee. You may not even be able to speak at a hearing. And so the leadership will do all that they can. I mean, we see with AOC, she's just got such a great platform that she has a lot of leverage, but most folks don't when they get elected locally. They don't have that kind of movement leverage to come in and be like, all right, try to silence me. I'll get my 9 million Twitter followers to attack you. So how do you carry that balance?
See, that's why I think that's why coalition building is so important, because it's never going to be about one individual. As with Bernie, it was never about Bernie. It was all about us and our movement, our working class movement. Because even once we get into office, yes, there are going to be lots of pushback against a lot of the different policies that we're trying to push through. But that's where the movement comes. That's behind us, and are demanding and fighting. And, there's so many different campaigns. Of course, there's the campaigns on the streets. There are campaigns, letter writing campaigns. There's a phone call, calling campaigns to push the others, especially if they're interested in re-election, to do the right thing. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's never about the one elected official doing all of it by herself or by himself. And so that's why I love this. I love this movement for Black Lives. I love because it's an intersectional movement. I'm a Black woman. I'm a lesbian. I'm an immigrant. I'm a mother, grandmother. So, there's so much about me that is Black, and that it encompasses all of those issues that we're fighting for on the street, right? So I'm a working class person. I'm a union member. And I believe that when we have this working class movement of working people, and I do believe that unions play a big part in that, because we are the people, we are the ones creating the profit, that our voices will matter when we push and fight. And and money, of course, is key to that. Is key to helping create the message oftentimes. So I'm really proud in this race to be endorsed by so many unions, because these are working class people who know what it feels like to be struggling and have to decide between rent and food and how do I move from A to B. And so yeah, absolutely, Nomiki, it's not ever going to be about one person, one leader, and that's so cool, because this movement has no leadership. It's all about us. Right. And it's very hard to pinpoint when there is a leader, because they can't come and attack just one person. It's just too many of us.
Unless you're Trump, and then it's COVID strikes. And then before we wrap up, I want to have a little bit of a moment of zen. This clip has been making the rounds. Jamie, you're in it. It's a clip of Michael Brooks when Bolsonaro got COVID. Can we play that clip, Dorsey?
Bolsonaro tested positive. I see it in a tweet from a verified account. It's translated. So let's confirm that. But that's very exciting.
Lula Libre. Oh man, yeah.
And it looks like apparently Bertrand, Washington Post. Yeah, this is legit. And he just had dinner with Trump.
Hell yeah. It's good to get some good news once in a while.
There's always silver linings. Well, whoever knew that so much good could have come out of Mar-a-Lago? Dirtbag MLK. Fingers crossed. We may be living in hell world, but no one said the comedy was bad. Oh, shit. Yo, they hugged.
We should pull up that video of them at Mar-a-Lago before we go.
We really are in uncharted waters right now.
Of course, this is when Michael thought Donald Trump got COVID, and
you gotta laugh. I always say, my parents taught me, if you have nothing good to say, don't say it. Don't laugh at people's, bad. But hey, karma is a bitch.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing, right? It's legitimately funny that it happened in this way.
Right.
30 days before the election. 30 days. He's got to be quarantined for 2 weeks. It's just logic, too. I mean, they want to deny logic. Well, then fine. Logic is going to sneak up on them. It just cause and effect. You're not immune to cause and effect as wealthy as you are. And that's what's so beautiful about this moment.
That's right. And just like when you deny climate change and it hits you and your home is burned or your family is washed out, it seems like that's the only time these folks believe what's going on. And so, yeah, you don't believe that COVID is real and you want to deny it. Now it hits you. Oh, yeah. Wow. Justice. Poetic justice.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, these ghouls often recover from it. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson recovered from it. Bolsonaro, or as I like to call him, Bolsarona, has had it like 67 times. But, one of them has to go eventually, right? And Trump is, look, Herman Cain died of the virus, right? And he was definitely younger than Trump, probably in better physical shape than Trump. So, this might be one instance where his insane wealth and privilege can't necessarily protect him from the consequences of his actions.
My question is, will his family have to pay his taxes afterwards?
Oh, God. I hope so. I mean, that is the least that they deserve. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining. This was an awesome panel. Just always a pleasure having you on. Enjoy your weekends. We'll be watching the quarantine. I'm sure there's going to be news coming out. I don't know if they're taking his phone away from him. I would say they should, but then who knows? Maybe he'll say something. Who knows what'll happen?
Who knows?
This is the upside to living in crazy dumb world right now, guys. We've only seen the bad stuff, but now, once in a while, something crazy dumb and good might happen.
Yes.
Jovanka, if folks want to help out on your campaign, where do they go?
They go to Jovanka for AC Transit, and you can just even Google my name, Jovanka Beckles, and it will come right up. And we can use all the help that we can get in this movement for the people, transit for the people. We can have a fare free system when we tax the wealthy. So yes, Jovanka for AC Transit, or just Jovanka Beckles, and it'll come right up.
Fantastic. And what's new on the Antifada, Jamie?
Oh, well, this week on the Antifada, we have a two-part History as a Weapon, which is Sean's history series that he does with Matt Crispin from Chapo Trap House. This one is very topical. It's all about QAnon and the political economy.
Wait, don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. We didn't say that. We didn't say it. Oh, what? We went the whole show without saying it.
Saying QAnon?
YouTube don't like it. YouTube don't like it.
Oh, my bad. Well, patreon.com/the Antifada.
That's where you can say it.
Hey, Nomiki, also, just to be specific, it's Jovanka for actransit.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you all. And Jovanka is also on the board of advisors of Matriarch Pack. We're doing a summit. We haven't, I guess today is when we're publicly announcing it. We're doing a big summit on October 30th. Stay tuned. We're going to put some information up so you can check it out. It's going to be 3 hours of radical feminists talking about how we're going to take over the world.
Yes.
Basically. They say we do it behind the scenes. No.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, guys. Special shout outs to Professor Harvey K in the chat. Loves chatting it up. It's awesome. And Billy Big Bricks, who's the moderator, and everyone in the chat room. Loving you, ladies. They're loving it. And have a nice weekend. Bob the Mod, thank you. Who else, Dorsey? Am I missing any? I'm reading a little chat on the side if you guys are wondering what I'm doing. Rye. Okay, another one. I can't see the chat live. See, the great thing about Jamie being part of the show of Majority Reporters, you guys are all talking back and forth, but Dorsey never wants to come on and talk with me. Maybe we can peer pressure him. Anyways, thank you to everybody for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. If not a patron, go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We're preparing for some new fun stuff. We need your support for it. You're going to like it, I promise, and we will announce it next week. Have a great weekend.
You're bad.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nomiki.
Thank you.
This was fun. This was a lot of fun. Amy, your trip. I love it.
Good luck in your campaign.
Thank you. All right. Talk to y'all later. Be safe.
Bye. Be safe. Be well.